begin today's meeting with a joint meeting with the Housing Committee. Here it is. For that, I'm going to turn it over now as we begin and call to order the special joint meeting. For the record, we have both Mr. Cedillo and also Mr. Englander as part of the Planning and Land Use Management Committee, and we've been joined by Mr. Fuentes as part of the Housing Committee. So with that, let me turn it over to Councilmember Cedillo to lead us through this special joint meeting. Mr. Cedillo?
Mr. Chair, I'm going to look to your leadership on this. I have a cold, as I shared with you earlier.
Okay.
You don't have to sit over. But I have a keen interest in this as the author of SB2. One of the challenges that continues to confront us is the fact that we are one of the top cities in the country for homelessness. And in a very, very large part, it's because we are bearing the burden for the region, for the state, and much of the nation. People send homeless people here. They're not born here, but they send them here mostly to your district and my district because they fail to meet their responsibilities. As you know, I authored SB2, which would require every city in the state to address this concern. Now, as a member of this august body, the Los Angeles City Council, I'm very interested in seeing how we are working to make sure that we address this issue in the context of our broader general housing plan. So,
thank you. So with that, we'll ask staff to come up and make a presentation on this item, please. Staff here? Yeah, thank you.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Matt Kolesny. I'm with the Department of City Planning, our citywide division, and I'm very pleased to present the city's update to the housing element of the general plan for the years 2013 to 2021. The housing element is a policy document meant to really chart the path and to be the city's vision for how we're going to address our significant housing needs, both currently and into the next 8 years. It is a part of our general plan, which means it's a policy document, which is meant to be referred to as specific housing programs and policies move forward separately. They should be in conformance with the general plan. It's a little different than some of our general plan elements in that it is on a strict state schedule. It's very much regulated by the state. As Councilmember Cedillo referred to, there are a number of requirements that need to be met. And we're doing the housing element along with all the Southern California communities right now are on this 8-year schedule. So I'll just, there's a lot in this document. I can't touch on everything, but I'll hopefully just walk you through the document. And if you have any questions, we have a team here from all the city departments touching on housing and hopefully answer any questions. The document begins with a very thorough housing needs assessment, trying to look at where we are in the year 2013 with our housing needs and into the future. Unsurprisingly, affordability sticks out. What is interesting is that even as housing prices fell, the number of people in Los Angeles paying more than they can afford for housing continued to increase, where it's now never been higher. Looking into the future, the needs of the senior population was identified as a really emerging need for the next 10 years. As seniors age, their housing needs are going to change, so we really tried to focus on that issue and how can we align our programs and policies with the needs of the senior population. Of course, we just had a major housing crisis with foreclosures and massive shift from owner to rental. We tried to get a handle on that and respond to that in the document. And there were some bright spots in housing, particularly in regards to homelessness. The city actually has been identified as having the largest declines of homelessness of any major city in the United States from 2007 to 2011. The 2013 numbers aren't quite out yet, but there may be a slight uptick there. The other good news is in overcrowding. Overcrowding's been significantly decreased. The Chapter 2 is our constraints, what's preventing us from meeting our housing needs, and this really, the big issue here is our lack of resources and our decline of resources, particularly for affordable housing. With the dissolution of the CRA and federal monies, the amount of dollars we have to spend on affordable housing is taking a drastic turn for the worse. So we try to keep that in mind as we develop our policies and programs. Kind of a centerpiece of the housing element is something called the Regional Housing Needs Assessment, or RHNA, where every city is given a number, a target for an 8-year period that we are supposed to try to meet in terms of new construction, and I believe there's some materials passed out that tells you about our progress in meeting our RHNA. For the last 8 years, with the housing slowdown, we aren't quite there, although the market rate development basically did keep up with the projections. We did not meet our goals in terms of our very low and low-income housing development, probably only about 20% of what was assigned to us through the RHNA. And again, that's based on population projections and what sort of income folks are going to be moving here. Our number of RHNA for the next 8 years is 82,000 units. It's about 10,000 units a year we're supposed to be producing. Again, about 57% of those affordable. And we've mapped those out for your council districts. You could kind of see what we had to do is actually show the sites, the locations where you can today build significant amounts of housing because they have capacity currently. And so we mapped those out. We put those in your packet. You can see where those are. We were happy to see that 85% of our sites for housing are within a half mile of transit. And we have more than enough sites to meet our RHNA for this period. Finally, kind of the meat of the document is really this Chapter 6, where we look at all of our goals, policies, and programs with regards to housing. Again, this is citywide. We found most of our goals and objectives and policies still very sound, still relevant, made very just minor adjustments to our policies to try to clarify them. With regard to our programs, there's about 130 housing programs listed in here, everything we do across the city that touches on housing. Again, we tried to just look at them, how well have they met their goals, are there ways we can improve them, are there gaps? And again, we focused on things like senior housing, transit, how can we incentivize more housing, more affordable housing, mixed-use projects, things of that nature. And again, wrapping up here, I just want to allude to the fact that we had a robust public participation in the development of this plan. We had about 40 organizations assisting us, looking at every single goal, policy, program we have, and telling us how they think we're doing. And that really helped us guide it. We've blasted this out to 20,000 members. We went out to neighborhood councils. We've been out to the chamber, the CCA have been very involved, building industry association, et cetera. So wrapping up, we have already sent the draft to the state. The state does review it. They've looked at the first draft. They're very happy with it. There were some minor requests to make changes. We made those, and those sound like they're good. And I do want to just call your attention, wrapping up, there is some minor changes we do ask that you amend in your packet, the final page. We were just missing one table and one table to get adjusted. I just want to call your attention. We're asking the council members to consider those amendments. But again, we're here with a team from our partners in the Housing Community Investment Department to answer any questions on any specific policies, programs you may have with the housing element. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So with that, let me ask my colleagues, before I go to public comment, if there are any questions or comments.
Ready?
Mr. Engler, Mr. Cedillo?
So, you said a mouthful.
Sorry. Yes.
So let's start with affordability versus stock. Where are we in terms of workforce housing? I know that for the shared areas that the council member and I have in downtown, that we're flipped upside down. 500,000 jobs, 50,000 units of housing. So is this a question, is it only a question of affordability, or do we also have a question of stock? Are we building enough? And then it seems to me this, if I'm mistaken, let me know, but that then more availability would also work towards lowering and increasing affordability. And so where are we in that?
Absolutely, Councilmember. That is kind of the one of the really things that sets apart the housing element in California is this idea that you need to have an adequate supply of housing to help bring down, keep and moderate the prices. So supply and demand kind of even out. That's what the number helps us aim for. And we've typically grown much faster population than we've grown in housing units throughout the past decades. Actually, this past decade, we actually built more housing than we grew in population, and that's because population was so slow. We haven't seen those immediate effects in our housing prices yet, and that may be partially, due to where the units are being built at, the income levels. Again, you mentioned workforce housing, that kind of middle median income housing is something where we actually had the low. We don't have very many programs that kind of hit that sort of median income 80 to 120 AMI level, and again, I mentioned what the production has been on the low and very low income is it's been significant. We should be proud of what we do, but the goal, the amount of the workers that come and the jobs that are being created in the city are unfortunately low wage, and we've been creating about 1,100 affordable units a year. The plan says we should be aiming for about 5,000 to 6,000 affordable units a year. So
Per district?
What's that?
Per district?
That's citywide.
Citywide?
That's citywide.
That's it?
Yeah, it's about 5,000 or 6,000 units per year is the goal.
Okay. So, having stated that, then, what in the document we're going to see plans or strategies or proposals of how we realize that?
Well, as I mentioned, Councilmember, we've lost a big chunk of our money that we've typically built these housing units with the dissolution of the CRA and federal money, some state grant programs no longer being available, city of industry funds no longer being available. Again, about a 64% loss in kind of the money we have to spend on those units. So it's a challenge. We had to bring down our estimates of what we think we're going to build from what we did in the past because of that, trying to be realistic. The City Planning Commission, I should mention, did add a new program in, requesting that the department look at what are our options to try to make up some of these fundings or make up the production of the affordable housing. Basically, just a number of different options on the table, from trying to recapture CRA money to a voter bond to a nexus a fee on development, things like that, are options that might be considered. And the idea is basically to explore these options. We're certainly open to other creative options to try to make up for the loss that we've suffered.
Okay. Let me, if I may, in the area of foreclosures, what are the things that we can do, and how do we hold accountable? I just saw recently a settlement with J.P. Morgan that was published in the newspaper, $11+ billion. How does the city benefit from that? Do we have access to that? And what can we do to hold actors like J.P. Morgan more accountable to the city of Los Angeles?
I may defer to our friends in the Housing and Community Investment Department. I don't know. Being the experts, they've typically been working with the federal programs that were created with the stimulus dollars, the neighborhood stabilization program, a really great program that bought up those defaulting properties, helped basically rehab them in a green way, get them back in the market in an affordable manner. The program's been a great success. Unfortunately, it's running out of money. A lot of the stimulus dollars that were aimed at foreclosure are running out of money. You particularly mentioned the lawsuit. Typically, the lawsuits against the banks, those things are happening at the sort of state level, and my understanding at least is these programs are being developed. How to spend those monies are happening at the state level, and I'm sorry, I don't have a great answer how that's coming down to the city.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Claudia Monterrosa from the Los Angeles Housing and Investment Department. In terms of foreclosure issues, we have been actively involved in that for the last 6 years. In fact, we have been tracking foreclosures at the citywide level since 2007, and we've had over 70,000 foreclosed units here in the city of Los Angeles alone. Though that foreclosure activity has tapered down this current year, beginning from the first through the third quarter of the year. And because of the activity that we did have, we were recipients of both NSP, NSP2, and NSP3 funding. And that money is tapering down as we speak right now. In addition to that, we had the hardest hit fund that was available, that was given out by the Federal Treasury Department. And it was $700 million that was distributed to the entire nation. And California received about a big portion of that. It was $700 billion, and the state of California received over $1 billion of that money. Now, that money was pretty much tied up because of the issues dealing with the bank. It wasn't on the side of the municipalities or the willingness to work with them. So we have not been able to break through that ceiling or through that wall. And so I think right now the best bet for us is to either explore additional funding to address post foreclosure recovery, similar to the neighborhood stabilization program, such as the Project Rebuild that I know that President Obama was talking about in recent months, actually at the beginning of this year. And that will provide an additional round for neighborhood stabilization program, but that would also include community development funding. So I think it's for us to be positioned, best poised to understand what's going on with the mortgages, what's going on with the foreclosure activity, and figure out how we can best strategize. Either is it going to be a housing, single-family home strategy, or is it going to be a large multi-family foreclosure strategy, or a smaller one? Because one of the things that we did start seeing, I would say in 2011 and 2012 was the foreclosure of larger RSO units, in particular in the Westlake area, City 1 and City 10 area. That has tapered off a little bit, but because of the market coming back, we need to have things in place and be able to be best positioned to either apply for money that becomes available through the state, that comes funneled through the federal government, or other ways to address it here locally.
Let me ask one last question. So the council's made up of half the people now come from Sacramento. The CRA is no longer with us for many reasons, and those are our new realities. What can we as former members of the state legislature do to help address those concerns that you've just brought to our attention?
Yes, Council Member. One of the things that we have actively been engaged in is in legislation to do the transfer of the successful transfer of the CRA former housing assets into the department, and we were successful in a bill that we sponsored, that the city sponsored, that was SB 341, and that was signed by the governor this past October. In addition to that, the city council and the mayor approved a support position for both AB 1229, which seeks the reversal of the Palmer fix, which is the inclusionary zoning law, that is no longer available to us. And in addition to that, we had a support position for the permanent source of funding that is currently SB 391. Now, SB 391 is moving forward. It was turned into a 2-year bill, and so what we would ask is continued support, active support for SB 391, because that means about $500 million statewide, and we will be eligible based on the formula, however that gets decided, because of the size of the city and the size of the problem that we have and the issue with the incomes in the city of LA, that we will be really well positioned to get funding from that pot of money. So that is an extremely important prospect for us, and enable us to get additional sources. And of course, AB 1229 was vetoed by the governor on the last day, on the 13th, and so we will continue to move forward and try to make headway on that. I know that there's some legal cases that are pending. There's the San Jose case, so we need to figure out what's going to happen as a result of that.
Good.
Thank you. Any questions? Mr. Fuentes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think it's for the person that was up previously, or maybe you can help me understand where one of the goals of the housing element is to make sure that we're trying to address and end homelessness, and with understanding how important permanent supportive housing, and how specialized that is as a housing opportunity, where are those sort of recommendations in this sort of update?
And I don't know if Helmi can come up here, our Assistant General Manager for Housing Development, but there are specific programs to address homelessness in there, and we can talk about it in the sense of the capital financing that we have available, and that just to state the importance of permanent supportive housing for us is that we've built over 2,600 units of permanent supportive housing since 2007, and that will continue to be a priority in our work plan.
Good afternoon. I'm Helmi Hisserick, Assistant General Manager for Finance in the Development Program in the Housing Department. And I think that the answer to the question about homelessness is related to the prior question about what to do in Sacramento. The loss of funding should be underscored. The last several years in Los Angeles, we have put in place over half the Affordable Housing Trust Fund towards permanent supportive housing, and we've partnered with the Housing Authority in the use of vouchers, and there's another source of funding which is from the county, typically used for services. So permanent supportive housing requires funding from 3 sources committed over a long term. Every single one of the sources of funding that we have has been dramatically cut. We're engaged in a conversation right now with the Housing Authority about the federal cuts to Section 8 vouchers, which will substantially impact permanent supportive housing. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund has dropped from about $100 million to about $25 million. The redevelopment dollars, which generally were about $50 million a year, are gone. And we're counting on the county right now to sort of shore us up with respect to funding. So the programs, we have a commitment to maintain set aside within the managed pipeline for permanent supportive housing, and we will continue to create permanent supportive housing. But I would just suggest that without a significant change in the resources available to provide this, our numbers, which we've been straining to achieve about 350 units of supportive housing a year, will drop down to a very, very small number and nothing close to what the homeless count would suggest.
Can you help me drill down a little bit on that? I mean, I absolutely understand sort of the inaction of the federal government and what is, and I want to thank Chairman Cedillo. We had a very informative session in the Housing Committee that helped us understand what it means for the Housing Authority and the Section 8 program. And I hate to sort of admit that I feel helpless as it relates to the federal government, but in the state, to underscore Mr. Cedillo's point here, are there opportunities that we can be seeking with the state in terms of trying to figure out how to get more of those resources? You mentioned there's 3 buckets. There's what was formerly the CRA, the federal government, and the county. Where is there an opportunity with the state of California to try to make up a third of that sort of challenge?
Well, everybody's looking for that opportunity. The single biggest loss of funding has been the redevelopment loss. So I think one piece of analysis that would be valuable to the decision makers is to understand not only what we lost annually, but what the tax increment flow on a present value basis across the city what has happened in terms of the loss of housing funds.
And just to help me understand, annually the loss was $50 million?
For housing set aside. So the total redevelopment agency set aside 20% of their funds for housing, for affordable housing. It approximately, over the last several years, was about $50 million a year. It actually ebbed and flowed depending upon the market and other conditions. So we look at it as a loss of about $50 million a year. But I think if you did an analysis of the tax increment losses on a present value basis, if you took 30 years of housing funding and looked at what the city lost, it's a huge amount of money. And the conversation with the state is active on the subject of a permanent source or some source to make up for the losses of housing money directed at homelessness and low-income housing throughout the city and the whole state.
And I recall, as I imagine Senator Cedillo will remember too, our colleague Tony Atkins was trying to lead the charge on sort of what elements of the redevelopment sort of pots of monies could go dedicated to permanent supportive housing and housing issues. And I don't seem to remember if there was any sort of progress in terms of legislation to create a permanent source to sort of fill the void that happened as a result of the dissolution. Is there a status of legislation that we should be tracking or authoring, as again to underscore my chair's sort of?
So we do tag team at the Housing and Community Investment Department, and Claudia actually tracks all the policy and the legislation. I'm not aware of what exactly the status is. I don't believe that the governor signed the bill, but
that was
the Tony Atkins bill on
1229 was the one that was vetoed. So was that the latest sort of effort, and are we beginning to start thinking about a strategy to try to figure out how to ask for those resources? And Helmi, thank you, by the way. You've been fantastic on this area, and I admire everything that you've done for the city. Thank you.
Yes, so the legislative session has ended, so now we're really regrouping, and the 2 key legislative items that we're going to be moving forward on are the Atkins bill, which is now dead, but a resurrection of that bill, which is the Palmer fix. And the other one is a continuing one, is SB 391, which is the PERM source. And we're going to be pushing forward on that. We do have a current support position from the city and the mayor that's good for the 2-year session. But we will need to do a lot of calling, a lot of organizing, helping folks working with our partners at SCANF so that we can move that forward and have a really strong LA voice in Sacramento. And I think that's something that we really have to make a concerted effort to have that and to make sure that we need this money. There is simply not enough resources to address the deep affordable housing need that we do have in the city. And with the continuing dwindling of federal sources, we have to be innovative, we have to be creative, and we have to do as much as we can to link housing not just with through a legislative process, but also through other means. The other thing that we're doing is pursuing cap and trade and figuring out how we can work with the ARB and figure out how we can actually include measures in there that link affordable housing and energy efficiency, perhaps doing green retrofits. And the other thing that we're going to be pursuing is the repurposing of the veterans housing bond. That was a bill that was actually approved this legislative session, and there will be a bond in next summer, and so we will have to work on that and perhaps put in a position in support of that one proposition, and in addition to that, work with the community members and figure out what would be the best way to deliver and to deploy those funds. We're talking about $600 million at the state level right now, and those funds could actually help funnel money to the city to help address our permanent supportive housing need, and as well as other special needs populations.
Thank you very much. We'll go to public comment now, and each of the public speakers will have 1 minute to speak on their item. I'll call 2 people at a time. You could, second name, you could prepare to come up after your previous speaker. First speaker is Andrew Burke. After Andrew Burke is Adam Cowing. Andrew Burke here? Okay. After Andrew Burke is Adam Cowing. I was asked to also mention that, does anybody need Spanish translation? We have the sets here that you can pick up from the Spanish translator who's here. ¿Alguien necesita la translación en inglés? Mr. Cedillo reminded me I should say that in Spanish, right? ¿Usted necesita algo? Aquí puede agarrar los audios con la persona que está acá y se puede oír los audios y ella va a traducir lo que se dice en inglés. Gracias. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm Andrew Buck. I'm one of the attorneys with Disability Rights California, and we are here to keep the topic of disability housing needs in the discussion of this housing element. We appreciate the city's incorporation of many of the comments we made in a letter dated June 26, 2013. We would like to suggest some places for further development in the current draft. I see my time has expired. May I continue?
You could continue. If you could provide another minute, please, and accommodate the speaker.
I'll make this very quick. We have 3 concerns. First of all, the housing needs assessment still blurs housing needs for populations with distinct housing needs. Examples include blurring the senior coordination with people with disabilities, which have two completely separate needs. There is the city also needs to assess available and accessible housing stock in the city. Currently, they have an assessment for one accessibility standard when there are three. And finally, we appreciate the city's efforts with the nuisance abatement task force and the slum housing task force. We would like to see that we would encourage the city to explore other alternatives to the community care facility ordinance, which if passed will impede housing for people with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Burke. Adam Cowing. After Adam Cowing is Tina Hossein.
Good afternoon. My name is Adam Cowing. Like Andrew, I'm an attorney. I work at Public Counsel, which is the nation's largest pro bono law firm located here in LA. I'd like to first thank city staff for all their hard work done on this housing element. As you know, the housing element requires the city to look at housing by income category, and so it's a great opportunity for the city to craft an action plan to attack the city's affordable housing crisis. Public Counsel, my organization, participated in the city's housing element task force, and we think the draft is a good start for creating a plan of action to attack the affordable housing crisis. Just a few things we wanted to highlight. The draft makes clear that the city does not currently have the funding to meet the need for affordable housing for low-income people. Last planning period, it met actually less than 20% of the need for housing affordable to low-income people. In this planning period, the draft projects to meet 18% of the need for affordable housing for low-income people. And this doesn't account for thousands of other units that might be lost that are either subsidized or rent stabilized. We're aware of the funding shortages, and so we just want to urge the city to explore new subsidies as well as land use policies which might encourage affordable housing that don't require new subsidies, such as mixed income housing, transferable development rights, that sort of thing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Tina Hossein. After Tina Hossein is Carlisle Hall.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Tina Hossein. I'm here representing the Los Angeles Area Chamber of Commerce and our 1,600 members. I'm also speaking today on behalf of the Building Industry Association of Los Angeles and Ventura counties, and we're here to support your approval of the city housing element before you today. BIA and the Chamber represented the city, represented the Chamber and the BIA on the city's housing element task force, which met regularly to review drafts and discuss priorities. After many meetings, follow-up discussions, and submitting comment letters, the Chamber and BIA would like to thank the planning staff for working very closely with us, and we appreciate the opportunity to have worked with you to guide the housing policy for the entire city. We find much progress in terms of incentives for developers to build or rehabilitate affordable housing units and a citywide focus on coordination to end chronic and veteran homelessness, as supported by the Chamber's work on Home for Good. As an aside, the Chamber has been very active in leading the Business Coalition support in Southern California on SB 391, the Homes and Jobs Act, and we also help support AB 639, which is the Veterans Housing Bond. So we look forward to being advocates in Sacramento for more permanent support source of affordable housing and working with the city to implement the veterans bonds. Real quick, we just want to say that good strides have been taken to help attract business investment in the real estate market and address affordable housing. We were initially concerned with inclusion of potential increased fees, requirements, and stifling red tape on the development industry, and this would have resulted in loss of opportunities for affordable housing construction. We're glad that those were taken out of the housing element, and thank the Planning Department and the Council once again for their support in guiding economic development in the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Carla Hall, and then Becky Dennison.
Good afternoon. I'm Carlisle Hall. I'm a land use lawyer, and I've had the privilege of representing the city on some of its most important legal matters over the years. And in the last Bradley administration, I chaired as the commissioner of the redevelopment agency, I chaired its affordable housing committee, which at the time had $100 million that we spent a year to subsidize affordable housing. That was back in the day when that kind of money existed, and I'd be pleased to help work with the city on restoring those kinds of funds. So I'm a strong advocate of affordable housing, but I strongly disagree with the current draft housing elements provisions about so-called granny flats. These are second units that are to be built in single-family areas. The current draft is basically a cover-up of a legal problem that has been buried and that the city planning department tries to continue to bury about its administration of the state law on granny flats and second units in single-family areas. Back in 2009, there was a study done at the direction of the then housing element, and the plug was pulled on that study with no recommended changes to the city's zoning ordinance. In 2010, the current planning director back then, he was chief zoning administrator, changed the entire system unilaterally without any legal authority. My written testimony can fill you in on the details of how that happened and how the city should now change that housing element to require a study and sort of go back to following its zoning ordinance and not following some spurious illegal administrative
Thank you
memorandum.
very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Becky Dennison, and then General Dogan.
I'm Becky Dennison with the Los Angeles Community Action Network. We are housing organizers in downtown and South LA, part of the Housing Collective working on these issues citywide. We have also participated in this process substantially from the beginning, from the task force and throughout the public hearings, and we believe that there are still some substantive changes that need to be made before final approval, although we also acknowledge all of the hard work that's gone in so far. I really appreciate the conversation about the state level funding sources. There's also a city level funding source issue that we need to address and that this council should address, so we're really hoping that the affordable housing benefit fee is prioritized in the housing element and then therefore taken up by this council. And the other piece that's really still lacking in the housing element is around housing preservation and strengthening tenant rights, which is a zero cost way of addressing the housing crisis, preventing displacement, preventing homelessness. And so there are recommendations that came out of your own study in the Economic Roundtable around strengthening the RSO that would be really helpful in the housing element as a roadmap to where the city needs to go. I'm going to leave our letter that we've submitted, and we'd be really happy to meet with you between now and final approval for these final changes.
Thank you. General Dogan, Pete White.
Yes, General Dogan, I'm a member of the LA Right to Housing Collective. The city simply states in a housing element that they will encourage affordable housing development along transit nodes. There is no decision or equality housing preservation in the sustainable neighborhood section, both of which are crucial to ensuring that mixed incomes and our transit-oriented development doesn't displace current low-income residents and reflects the full spectrum of housing needs. There are no concrete policies to achieve production, or preservation along transit nodes, and therefore no clear plan to truly have sustainable neighborhoods. A no net loss policy should be included to ensure that current housing stock at each affordable level is preserved. Other measures to prevent displacement and development errors must also be included. Additionally, a fair housing analysis must be included to determine who is most negatively impacted by TOD displacement and programs to address. And I just wanted to say in closing, in my neighborhood, downtown LA, where you got development going on all the time, my neighbors are being told that they're not going to be displaced, but by the time the grand opening comes on a new project, they ain't nowhere around, they're being displaced. So I encourage you that look at this plan real clear and make sure that there is no net loss for low-income housing units. Thank you. And that's citywide.
Thank you. Pete White, Joe Thomas.
Pete White with the Los Angeles Community Action Network. Just want to make a couple of points. One point around housing preservation as it relates to RSO housing and habitability. Program number 27 addresses the preservation of RSO housing, but does not mention the need to track affordability levels within rent-stabilized housing, nor does it explicitly address the need to preserve affordable housing, affordable rent-stabilized units. Program number 47 in the proposed draft housing element, also affordable housing monitoring, addresses the need to create such a program, but does not specifically mention the need to monitor rent-stabilized units. We think these are very important points. The last point, quickly around habitability, we want to make sure that there's a policy that really talks about Mickey Mouse repairs. So many individuals in our city are buried under the weight of substandard repairs. Lastly, homelessness in the city of Los Angeles is not down. I think any conversation around policy should be rooted in empirical data. LASA just released its homelessness numbers. They're up 15% roughly, and Los Angeles continues to hold the dubious title of homeless capital of the nation. And so for us to move forward, we need to move forward with empirical data. And I appreciate the conversations around homelessness. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe Thomas and Jaime Zeladon.
Good evening. My name is Joseph Thomas, LA Collective Housing. Program number 111, New Resources for Rental Assistance, is a welcome start towards preventing homelessness. However, it does not include any concrete benchmarks for leveraging or administering funds for rental assistance. An additional program should be included that would create policies such as enacting the Economic Roundtable's recommendations to limit rent increases. Examples of such policies include eliminating a 3% minimum rent increase and a 2% additional utility increases. Like in a lot of cities, in each and every city except your city, LA, you have property that is under the power of the city, whether it was for taxation, whether it's foreclosure, or not. Yet and still, every other city would take an individual like mine, and I'm homeless, and they would give you I would pay $1, I would sign this contract. I have 18 months to bring the electric and the plumbing up. Other than that, then I can pay the bill off on the taxations as payment and stuff. And you have another resource of putting people off the street in there. It's not a question of people not making up their responsibilities. We are 63, 64, 65 years old. Social Security does not sustain your cost of living. So, gentlemen, do your resources and please get it right. Thank you.
Thank you. Jaime Zeladon, and last is Yvonne Michelle Autry. Dos minutos para...
Okay.
2 minutes, please.
Okay. Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Jaime Celedón, soy residente de viviendas públicas de Mar Vista Garden en West LA.
Good afternoon, my name is Jaime Celedón and I live at
Mar
Vista Gardens
de Housing Development.
in the Housing Development.
Soy miembro de la colectiva Pro el Derecho Humano a la Vivienda también.
I am a member of the Human Rights Collaborative. And it's an element, it's a housing element section.
Preservación de la vivienda pública.
This conservation of housing, of public housing.
Testificamos el día 27 de julio en nuestra carta que nos oponemos a la descripción de la vivienda pública en el elemento de vivienda como obsoleta, entre comillas.
We testified on the 27th of July And in our letter, we expressed our opposition of the description of public housing under the housing element for it to be described as obsolete, in quotes.
La vivienda pública dentro de la ciudad de Los Ángeles son comunidades con un fuerte valor cultural e histórico, además de ser la única viviendas permanentemente económicas que existen dentro de la ciudad.
The public housing within the city of Los Angeles are communities with strong cultural and historical values. Additionally, they are the only permanently low-income or economical housings that exist within the city.
La vivienda pública es un recurso público vital y precioso.
Public housing is a public resource that's vital and it's also very valuable or precious.
El elemento de la vivienda debe incluir protecciones más fuertes para Jordan y todas las viviendas públicas de Los Ángeles.
The housing element must include stronger protections for Jordan Downs and for all the public housing in Los Angeles, including guarantees that continue.
Incluyendo la garantía a la continua posesión pública de los terrenos y los edificios en proyectos, la aseguración al reemplazamiento de uno a las viviendas públicas, lo que garantiza que los residentes actuales no sean desplazados.
This includes the guarantee of continued public domain or possession of the properties and buildings within the projects. The reassurance of replacement one for one of the public housing units in the public housing projects.
Thank you. Muchísimas gracias. Yeah, gracias. Thank you. Yvonne Michelle Autry.
Thank you for an opportunity to address this board. I'm also a member of the collective as a 10-year stakeholder and very concerned resident and member of the downtown community, and also as a recipient, a citizen who does avail herself of affordable housing availability. I'd like to encourage you to continue in the construction of affordable housing units so that we can, as expediently as possible, move homeless people into these units. I'd also like to remind you that this is a democracy where the right to housing should be maintained for all constituents, of course, not just the upper class or the wealthy, which tends to be the trend now, especially in the regentrification process of this downtown area. I'd also like you to listen and to observe and to respond positively to the concerns of the previous spokesman, my comrades, in maintenance of a higher standard and quality of living for all of us, especially making the repairs, maintaining access to hot water, running water, elevators for people that are disabled, physically disabled, and services that should be available. Again, we shouldn't have to remind you this is a democracy, not an oligarchy, aristocracy, and that all of us have the right to housing and the continued access to affordable housing so that we can move those that are disenfranchised from the street into these units. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Without being harassed, coerced, or suffering incrimination and demonization as recipients of affordable housing in Section 8. It's our right without suffering character assassinations. It's our right.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And that concludes our public comment. We could ask staff to come up one more time, please. I have a couple amendments I would like to make here. Do we pass those out? We are obviously the issue of homelessness and addressing housing overall and is of concern to the city. And Home for Good is an approach that has been proposed by the Chamber of Commerce as well as United Way. Most of us strongly believe, at least those that have publicly spoken on the issue and who want to address homelessness, believe that permanent supportive housing is one of the methods in which to address our homelessness issues and one of the most effective. And to that end, I wanted to ensure that the element in this housing plan that speaks to homelessness incorporates some of those ideas and thoughts. And I know that the plan itself supports it and states that it believes in the concepts and ideas being promoted by the Home for Good program. There is a handout I've given that kind of makes some technical changes, really, that prioritizes the most vulnerable in addressing homelessness. And the most vulnerable is a term of art used in the homelessness discussions that is actually, there are some indicators as to what defines a person or a population as the most vulnerable, that if we could prioritize that within addressing homelessness, and I think that's something that Home for Good would agree to. So if my colleagues would agree, those are some changes we can make, mostly technical, that will address that, and we could incorporate that into the homelessness proportion of that, and I'll put forward that those amendments if there's no objection to that. Secondly, in doing that, I'll verbally ask that in Program 120 that we target the regular turnover of permanent supportive housing units to place and serve the chronically homeless in those units. And on Program 122, we add the objective report on applicability of standards for excellence criteria being developed by Home for Good. So if we are stating just generally this report that we support those, we should be more specific to that. And finally, amend Program 127 to replace the objective with all providers receiving city funding participate in HMIS. HMIS is a tracking system that is now being proposed, the Homeless Management Information System, that we are hoping to better coordinate and get data on what we are doing. So if that's amenable to my colleagues, we'll add those amendments as well. It doesn't substantially change the program, but adds just recommits us to the Home for Good program and better says that we will be applying some other standards to this. If that's okay? Yeah. Well, thank you. And any other questions or comments on this? Okay. So on the Plum Committee, with no objection, we would move this forward to full council. And I assume the same with the Housing Committee. Housing Committee concurs with those amendments. Great. Thank you. So ordered. Thank you very much. And with that, we will now go to our Planning and Land Use Management Committee, and I want to thank Mr. Fuentes for joining us. You're welcome to stay, but you could do as you wish. We are now adjourning the special committee. Okay. All right. So, going to the Plum Committee, if we could move to item number 2 and ask the CLA to read that into the record, please. I'm sorry, let's do this. I am going through the consent items. So if there is no objection, let's place items number 2. 5 and 3 on consent. I'm sorry, item number 2 and 3 on consent, and item number 5 is a continuance to 11/19.
And item 2, Councilman, just to be clear, you're adopting that motion, so it'll go to council.
Pardon me?
Item 2, you're adopting the motion because it's an amendment to the specific plan, so it needs to go to the council.
If you could read those 2 items in the record, items number 2 and 3 that are on consent.
Sure, council members, item 2 is a motion Krikorian correct, and it's asking for an adjustment to the boundaries of the Valley Village specific plan. So the action should be to adopt that motion. And item 3 is a zone change in CD4, and that one will go on consent.
Okay, and item number 5, which we will continue to 11:19.
Yes, that is a Cultural Heritage Commission recommendation to designate Johnny's Coffee Shop Restaurant as a historic monument.
Okay, we'll continue that to that date. Item number 7, we will receive and file, that is Director of Planning report. And so we will now go to item number 6. I understand we have some LAPD officers here, and we'll put that up first. If you could read that into the record,
Sure.
please.
Item number 6, Councilman, is an appeal filed by Salon Corona, Inc. Mario Acevedo is a representative. This is a nuisance abatement case in CD2 for a nightclub known as Hacienda Corona Nightclub.
Okay, so we have planning staff here, please. Planning staff, give your report, and then we will go to the appellants. First, the planning staff. Okay. Yeah.
We've all agreed that there would be a request a continuance of this.
Oh, you would like the continuance?
Yes.
Okay.
And so I think that we shouldn't be hearing the evidence since it just preconditions the council when
Okay.
we're not making our presentation today. We've spoken to Z.A. Brown.
Can you speak into the microphone, please?
Sure. Zoning administrator. Well, first let me introduce myself. Stuart
Sure.
Miller for Hacienda Corona.
Yeah.
Zoning Administrator Brown has said that he would support the request, and Councilman Kokorian, whose district this facility is located in, likewise supports it.
Okay.
We're trying to work out only 2 remaining issues. We've agreed to the other 19. So
Okay.
we'd rather not get into the evidence today.
Mr. Brown, are you okay with a continuance?
Yes, however, I do believe that LAPD as well as the council office may have a different position.
Okay.
If I just may note, yes, there is a question of due process here, and that's just a misunderstanding on their part that it is between the applicant in this case is the City of Los Angeles, and the appellant body, whether an item is continued or not. Their understanding was that this matter would be continued and that this decision, because they asked, would be continued. I do want to note that usually when we continue in a matter like this, there are some concerns. One is that we typically see a revocation case like this one to be continued when it gets close to the holiday season, and that is because these type of uses like to gain that revenue during the holiday season. In this case,
Okay.
I believe their continuance is until beginning of December, so that's not an issue in this case. This is not an appeal of the whole or the entire decision. This is only an appeal of a couple of conditions. So what I believe that they're willing to do is to work with the body of the conditions, but there's only 2 that are in question. And this doesn't seem to be that kind of case where I would say we must hear today.
Okay. Does CD2 wish to speak on the continuance?
Councilman Doug Mizzen representing Councilman Paul Krikorian. I guess I could say we're agnostic on this. I'll defer to you. I don't know what the availability of the officers who have come down for this hearing could be to return for it. This item, I believe, has to be in council by Friday the 22nd, so I don't know even what the continuance window would be, a week at most or 2.
Yeah.
So I will defer to you.
Okay.
We could hear it today. Staff is ready. LAPD is ready. We're ready.
Yeah, and let me ask the LAPD officers, can the LAPD officers here? If you could come up, please. We respect your time in terms of having to come testify, and we would prefer, you to go out and do your work. We have a lot of important work out there. Would you be available next week to come back? Because if we do a continuance, it'd be for a short period of time, because we only have 2 matters left. Would it be too troublesome to come back, let's say, within a week or so, or 2 weeks? 2 weeks? Sure. Well, let me ask,
Could you give us an exact date? I'm sorry.
Okay. 2 weeks. What would that be? In Plum? Why 2 weeks?
Sir, to the extent you need our consent, we will waive this time limit.
Yeah, as it was explained, it's really a continuance between. This does not work like a court system. This is a policy system where it's between the applicant, which is the city, and this committee. So we are the ones that agree to a continuance or not. So 2 weeks would be when?
2 weeks in Plum would be November 19th.
To be honest, I have other cases that are in appeal, so I would rather it go today.
Go now? That's what okay. And what's your question?
I just had a question that the appeal suggests only two of the conditions, 10B and 18A, that there were issues. Under those conditions, it appears that there are some ideas. I don't know if the council office or LAPD has had the opportunity to look at what the suggestions were, and if those suggestions may or may not meet and qualify for those conditions. If they don't, then it's moot. I don't want to do a deep dive into that.
Okay,
in other words, so it appears that the owner or operator has come up with what they suggest might be a compromise according to this, with the idea of the VIP sectioned area, etc. I don't know if those have been reviewed or if there are any suggestion on
I would say that there is agreement that condition 18A could be amended as a wish with a little caveat, additional language. But as for 10B, in regards to the bucket, bottle, and pitcher services, the answer is no. There is disagreement still.
Okay, so
disagreement between who?
Between the applicant and LAPD, City Council, and staff.
Okay.
So if it sounds to me as if we're almost there and there's only one condition, and rather than tie it up for, it would be my suggestion for 2 weeks, particularly given the LAPD's officers' time and resources. It's up to the chair, but I would defer to you.
Yeah, we're going to hear this today, sir.
Let me make one more comment about this, if I may, please. We had 50 witnesses lined up to come and address you today. These are working people. They cannot take off 2 days to come here. Based upon our understanding or legitimate misunderstanding, we told them not to come today. So we've got 2 witnesses who are police officers, and I appreciate more than as much as anyone the importance of their time. But our hands are now tied because our witnesses are not here based upon our understanding that this matter would indeed be continued.
You were told this was going to be continued?
It was our understanding that everyone supported the continuance.
Do you have that in writing, sir?
We have, yes. I have something here. Let me show you. This is an email from Doug Mensman, who I believe works for Council Member Corcoran. Well, since it's already on an agenda, you or someone would need to show up to the Plum meeting and submit a continuous request in writing to a date certain, which I have with me. We would support that request at the hearing if they ask. We can meet, but at current, the council office is not willing to budge on barring the box service. And then our communication with the zoning administrator confirmed our understanding.
And my final question is this. What do you think you can achieve if we continue this, if we only really have one item to discuss?
Two things. First choice is we would resolve it. There were 21 components of this proposal. We've agreed to 19 and come to a compromise on number 20. We are reasonable people, and we're trying to work with the city to make this process work and make everyone happy. And number 2, we have our witnesses whom we did not call with the understanding that they would only have to come back a second time. They work for a living. Many of them don't make a lot of money. They can't take 2 days off. It's just not fair to us. So we would have to reconvene regardless.
Okay.
So I don't see what the importance is of doing this thing today. There hasn't been an incident at this place for over a year.
Okay. And the only concern I have is that if you were under the impression that it was going to be continued, we need to respect the due process and a fair hearing. The only other issue that is of concern is LAPD's time. So I think we need to balance that with your misunderstanding. And somebody told me 2 weeks, but maybe next week, would that, we don't, sure.
Mr. Chair, next week, council is in recess.
Okay, so it's
So
2
the-
weeks. We have
yeah,
to stick with the 2 weeks.
Next plum meeting is November 19th, and that is 2 weeks.
Okay.
There is something scheduled for the 19th already.
What?
There is something scheduled for the 19th here on
Okay.
this very case.
council. In council.
I see, it's a council, I'm sorry.
So we can't schedule it for the 19th. It's in council already on that morning.
Sir, at this point, if the committee makes a decision today, then this item will be scheduled in council on the 19th. It is noticed there was a 500-foot radius, 24-day notice that was sent out on this appeal with the plum date on November 5th and the council date on the 19th. Now, if this committee chooses to continue this item on the 19th, then a new council date will be scheduled.
I see. Okay. Mr. Englander?
My suggestion in hearing all this information and having had you read the email as well and try to understand where your interpretation of that would be, is that we accommodate all of them. And so, and to do that, we could do that, Mr. Chair, if you would, we can hear the matter today, either A, make no recommendation, and it'll be decided at council, so we get all the evidence in, and then you still have the opportunity to bring people for public testimony to council, just as you would here. You said they couldn't make it down twice anyway. Better they come in front of the full city council who's going to be making the determination rather than just a few of us in front of one committee. I'm not looking for a debate for that. I'm just making my suggestion. That way we also get the officers' testimony on the record and free their time, because it's not going to, their testimony and experience and history with this case isn't going to change between now and 2 weeks from now. It's only going to take them out of the field. And so it would behoove us to hear the item now, send it on to council either with a recommendation or no recommendation, but ultimately council would then have the ultimate decision, and the council office can continue to talk in that 2 week period to staff and figure out if there is any additional compromise that could be brought up at council. That would be my suggestion.
I would have to object to that. We have
let me hear him out.
We do have, as several people have already recognized, a due process right to present our evidence here. We were misinformed, misled, misunderstood, and we don't have them here now. And the notion that if this is a one-sided hearing, one can predict what the result will be, and then it goes to the council with the imprimatur of this body, and it doesn't know that we only had half a hearing. And so all the momentum is against us, and that's not fair either at this level or at the next one. I would propose a different compromise, which is the two officers are here, let them make their presentation, and then we will continue this hearing to another date when we can bring our witnesses. And that way, the one concern I've heard is the officers' time. Well, my suggestion would resolve that problem and still preserve our due process right to be heard.
Okay, let's do that. We could continue this item to the 19th. Let's listen to LAPD's testimony today, and the LAPD also reserves the right to have another officer be here present at that time and restate their case as well at that time. We're not going to preclude that testimony from happening again with either these two who are here or another individual who's here. Yes.
Okay. All right. And
can I just make a comment?
Sure.
Just to make it easier, we agreed just to do it all on one day. We'll all appear on the 19th, that we can just do it all in one.
Okay, that's fine. Okay. Well, let's continue this to the 19th. And, sir, the one thing I want to make clear is that this is not a judicial proceeding. This is a City of Los Angeles administrative proceeding. There are different rules. We don't follow those. I know you're an attorney. We often get people in here who think it's the same type of rules that apply. This has been a discretionary decision to continue this, but I'm only basing that on the fact that you did have something in writing to support your claim that you had a misunderstanding of what occurred today. Otherwise, I think we would have gone on and heard this item today.
Well, thank
okay?
you very much. One question, what time on the 11th, on the 19th?
We start the meeting at 2:30.
2:30 on the 19th. Thank you.
And sir, the agenda is available online. So, yes. But if you have any questions, you can call the clerk's office.
Thank you. We have some cards on these items, but again, oh no, we don't have cards on these.
I'm sorry?
We're continuing this item completely. Yeah, thank you. Next item, please.
Next item, Councilman, is item 1, which is a motion, Weezer Price. It's asking planning to expedite the downtown community plan and zoning code, revisions as it relates to the type of housing that can be constructed along commercial corridors.
Thank you. Staff here? We're just going to refer we're going to refer this to staff, but I do want to state that this item came forward with the idea that as we are looking at the convention center and the need to make that a more attractive, active convention center for the future, with or without the football stadium, we need to provide more hotel rooms and accommodate the demand for more residential units in downtown LA. And we certainly don't want to miss this time where we're getting a lot of proposals for low-rise proposals on parcels of land that could accommodate either hotels or higher-rise, denser residential units. I just would encourage you to be open to suggestions and comments. People may have a lot of ideas as to what type of incentives we could provide. Should we ask, should this interim control ordinance then be lifted? The types of incentives we would like to provide. I've been telling people that we'll take in as much input as possible to make this work. And so we're just directing this to staff and hope to have it back at some time in the near future to hear this out. And I think as we're doing our downtown development code and the community plans, I think it would go hand in hand with that as well. It gives us an opportunity to rethink and re-envision the types of development requirements we would have for downtown at the same time. So thank you. And would it be possible, if I could clarify that the motion requests exemptions from the ICO for projects using more, not less than 95% of allowable FAR in zones with 3-to-1 FAR. That was a misprint. And instruct the department to report back on grandfathering mechanism to capture projects already filed and working with the city in good faith. There's some projects already filed within this zone. I don't know how we're going to deal with the grandfathering. You guys come up with some ideas, talk to my staff, and we'll figure that out. And finally, report back to Plum in 60 days. Is that possible? If I say 30, would you say yes?
Patricia Diefender for staff of the planning department. I think 60 days would be better.
Okay, 60 days.
Okay.
And we'll have a draft ICO ordinance and report offering recommendations for hotel and high-rise incentives. So we'll refer that to staff and see you back in 60 days. That's the holidays, isn't it?
Yep.
It's probably going to be a little bit more than that, but okay.
We'll work out the dates. Okay.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your attention on this matter. We have a few cards on this. We have 1 minute each on each of these items. Dale Goldsmith. After Dale Goldsmith is Noel Fleming. Sir.
Good afternoon, Councilmember Weezer, honorable committee members. My name is Dale Goldsmith. I'm a partner with the law firm of Armbruster, Goldsmith, and Delvac. We represent Lennar Multifamily Investors in Hanover, both of which have pending projects in Zone 2 of the proposed ICO. There are apartment projects that were filed, had applications filed for them several months back, and would be caught up in the ICO if there were not appropriate grandfathering provisions. We support the ICO. We think the goals and objectives are very laudable, and we look forward to working with staff to make it happen. However, we're very concerned about the grandfathering language. I have some specific language I'd like to recommend. These projects and any similar projects for which applications were on file on September 10th, 2013, that was the date of the original motion. Those projects with applications on file should be grandfathered. We've heard some discussion about having a deemed complete requirement. I'm concerned about that because, unlike other cities, the city doesn't send deemed complete letters out, and the question of whether something's complete could be subject to dispute. We'd prefer a bright line. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much, and thank you for that suggestion. Noel Fleming. After Noel Fleming is Jim Reese.
Good afternoon, council members. Noel Fleming, Director of Legislative Affairs at Central City Association. I'm here today to testify on behalf of Central City Association and our 450 business members. Since this motion was introduced, our organization and our members have been thinking really carefully about the best way to balance the long-term vision for downtown with the current need for economic investment and jobs. Therefore, we don't have a position at this time, but I wanted to share with you the critical concerns that we heard from our members. The first is, as Dale touched on, the need for a flexible grandfathering clause that allows pending projects to move forward. We don't want to be sending a negative message to the development community at a time when we're just starting to feel the uptick in the economy. The second issue is the great need for incentives to bridge the gap between where the current market is and where the future vision for downtown lies. The use of incentives to encourage the right kind of development is absolutely essential. Without them, you're just giving us another stick instead of carrots. I have a couple of specific suggestions. The first is the CLA's hotel incentive program, which could be implemented downtown as a pilot. The second is a dedicated case management unit for high-rise projects to streamline the problems with high-rise. Anyway, those are just two suggestions. We're happy to work with city staff on more. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jim Reese and Will Wright.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Jim Reese, Senior Vice President with the land use consulting firm of Craig Lawson and Company. And we appreciate, as land use consultants, we do a lot of work in the downtown area. We appreciate the vision of this motion, and we also agree that the city deserves a world-class skyline. Much like the last two speakers, we do believe that the way to get to this is through a series of incentives. We're happy to work with your staff and planning staff on incentives that we see every day or that are requests that we have to come in and ask for, or that we see are their impediments to building high-rise. And we also feel that the grandfathering clause is really important to get included into this. We have a lot of clients who've worked hard to get their projects in a position where they've already filed or they're just about to file. And I think that it's very important that we push this grandfather clause out quickly, and I would suggest that maybe the grandfather date be the date that the council actually acts. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Will Wright, Sandy Sanchez, last speaker.
Good afternoon. Will Wright with the American Institute of Architects. Thanks for your time, and thank you for the leadership on this ordinance. This is something that we are at the table with you. We want to work with the City Department of Planning on this. This is not just a downtown issue. This is a regional issue. This is how can we grow and sustain the growth that we need for the LA County area. We have very few finite opportunities for that growth, to absorb that growth in a responsible manner. I think everyone that owns a single-family home would appreciate maximizing, optimizing the land use of downtown. This is from a sustainability point of view of putting as much as we can near transit in that investment that we have committed to as a Angelino. So we look forward to being part of this table. We do see it as an incentive package. We do see the way to make the denser development pencil out for the developers is the key to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandy Sanchez.
Good afternoon. I'm Sandy Sanchez with the Building Industry Association. I'm the Government Affairs Director, and from the BIA, obviously, anytime we hear ICO, we get a little bit concerned. So I want to ditto the comments made by CCA and Dale Goldsmith, but also want to just highlight the fact that when we propose developments, they, especially downtown, they all go through substantial entitlement review by staff. They go through CEQA review, and I can appreciate the need to advance the community plans and prioritize them, especially when it comes to the economy and jobs and growing our downtown. But I think we should evaluate the fact that grandfathering is very important due to the fact that we will have extensive review of any proposal as it's brought forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we'll see this item back in council in 60 days. Thank you. And so the grandfather issue, I think it's still under discussion. I think that's one of the issues I've heard of most concern.
Plum, I think.
Plum. Yeah. And so with no objection, so ordered. Next item.
Yes, Councilman. Item 4 is the next item, which is the Cultural Heritage Report on the designation of the Shoppers Market as a historic cultural monument in CD1.
Okay, is staff here to report on this item?
Good afternoon, council members. Ken Bernstein with the Office of Historic Resources and Department of City Planning. This item was continued from the committee meeting of 2 weeks ago, and just to reiterate the recommendation of staff and the Cultural Heritage Commission, it is to declare the Shoppers Market property a historic cultural monument. That was a unanimous vote of the Cultural Heritage Commission, that this property exemplified, is a notable example of a mid-century modern style supermarket property type. The subject building contains many architectural features notable to mid-century modernism, including large plate glass windows, decorative concrete walls, glass curtain facade, diamond-shaped overhang that is quite distinctive. So the recommendation of staff and the Cultural Heritage Commission is to declare the Shoppers Market building a historic cultural monument. I'm available for any questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions at this moment? No. Okay, thank you very much. This item, I believe we had public hearing already. It satisfied the public hearing, and now if I could turn it over to CD1, Mr. Cedillo.
Mr. Chair, there is an incredible amount of interest and controversy in this matter. One based upon very valid values and commitments that have been made. I want to thank all the parties who have been engaged in this process. I appreciate their commitment to help work this out. I have met with all the parties, with the Highland Park Heritage Trust, with the LA Conservancy, with the Superior Grocers, with the property owners. We've had a full hearing. My staff has met with several of the parties. I have met with many people recently on this matter, both formally and informally. There are others who have been here who would desire to speak, and I would ask, even though we have closed public comment, that we would reopen it and perhaps maybe have 2 and 2 from each side for a very limited conversation before we come to a conclusion.
Okay. So you would, are there 2 selected from each side, sir? How would you? Okay, if we're going to do that, we would ask that the applicant and the call the appellant. Okay, so we can have the applicant come up, please.
No.
Sorry, we could have 2 minutes for each speaker.
I've submitted a letter for your consideration, a copy of which was provided to you in response to Mr. Delvac's October 22nd letter that was submitted to this committee. In the letter, we clarified several misstatements that were made, specifically with regards to the importance of the nomination and his assertion that its lack of historical significance and ineligibility for designation is due to it being out of the period of significance. To be clear, the preservation plan for the Highland Park Garvanza HPOZ identifies a period of significance within between 1886 and 1961. So this building was built within the period of significance, and it has retained a lot of its character-defining features.
Is that, I don't want to interrupt you, but I'm going to interrupt you. Is that accurate? And when did that become, and when did that change the period that was going to end in the 1940s? Mr. Bernstein, can you bring clarity on this matter?
Okay, can we do this, Mr. Cedillo? We could let the speaker complete his time. He's got about 1 minute and 10 minutes, and note that, and then we will go back and ask that of Mr. Bernstein.
Sure.
If that's okay. Thanks.
Great. So no one is interested in damaging the financial or economic stability of Superior Market, nor would it benefit us or anyone to stifle their success and ability of any of the businesses to prosper in our community. We can what we can certainly do is encourage the owners of Superior to embrace our community's heritage and architectural significance and capture that as a viable opportunity to continue its success and provide to our community. It should be noted that this property, as have many others that were built during the middle of the of last century, have taken on an importance as historic buildings. As they age and their contemporaries are lost to demolition and ill-designed remodels. All that being said, it begs the point that we are looking at a building that has been preserved for over 50 years as a testament of our efforts and interest in the city of Los Angeles to care for and maintain our built and natural environment. We as a community are the stewards of these resources, and we have the obligation to protect and maintain these over time. With that, we'd like to respectfully urge you to support staff's and the Commission's recommendation for designation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Bernstein, I believe before Mr. Fisher comes up, there was a question by Mr. Cedillo.
So again, Ken Bernstein for the Record, Department of City Planning. To answer the question, the period of significance, which is the historic period of development of this historic district, it's now the Highland Park Garvanza HPOZ, Historic Preservation Overlay Zone, was expanded, I believe, in 2009 or 2010 when the Garvanza neighborhood was added on to the existing Highland Park HPOZ. So the period of significance was extended to the early 1960s, and that information is reflected in our preservation plan for Highland Park and Garvanza. So in essence, both are accurate. What Mr. Castillo stated is accurate. At the same time, this particular property was surveyed originally as part of the Highland Park HPOZ, and at the time, the period of significance did not extend into the post-World War II period, and this property was classified as a non-contributor to that HPOZ. Nevertheless, we consider as staff of the Office of Historic Resources and then the Cultural Heritage Commission whether this property individually is eligible for historic cultural monument status, regardless of how it was surveyed 20 years ago for the HPOZ, and our recommendation was that it did meet the criteria for designation. So I hope that clarifies that changed along the way.
Thank you. Charles Fisher?
Good afternoon, Charlie Fisher, 140 South Avenue 57. And yes, I did write the nomination for the Highland Park Heritage Trust for this particular property. We were dealing with the Delvac letter, and there were a lot of, as Mr. Castillo mentioned, there were a number of errors in it. One was it stated that I did not support and I did not like the design of the Craftsman Jack in the Box. That is simply not true. I did like it. I've championed that design. I did not ride with the Cultural Heritage Commission in the van, as was inserted by the letter. There are a number of items in there that are just plain wrong. Having said that, some of the items that were brought up in that letter involve procedural issues, such as Brown Act issues. One of the concerns was that the nomination was not drafted by the city staff, which the vast majority of nominations are not drafted by city staff. I even mentioned the fact that Mr. Delvac has been championing the nomination of the hotel, the Century Plaza Hotel, which was not written by city staff. This is the normal procedure for HCM nominations. This nomination is supported by 2 neighborhood councils, by the Los Angeles Conservancy. Linda Dishman is here representing the Conservancy, the executive director today. We all believe this is a very important property. The arguments that have been made by the opposition have basically been based on procedural matters and trying to compare it to other buildings. But the fact of the matter is they have never been able to attack the exact design of this particular building because it does qualify. And we have offered to work with the Superior on this. There was an original agreement back in 2006 that actually extended back to the 90s where we would not nominate this building for monument as long as the facade was maintained, because that was our concern, and their concern is they wanted control in the interior and things of this sort. When the nomination came in was because Superior said, we are going to make our changes, and we don't care about the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill Delvac.
Honorable Council members, Bill Delvac of Armbruster, Goldsmith, and Delvac on behalf of the property owner, not the tenant, the market. I'd like to comment that I applaud what this committee's done. There's been an extraordinary amount of testimony. The degree to which staff and others have dug into the details and paid careful attention to this is exemplary. But in digging into those details, I think we should grapple with a few key issues. The merits. There have been many many issues raised on both sides. The process and the future. I'm going to leave to the record the merits. I think a lot has been said on both sides. As to the process, if the period of significance is 1961, and I am reluctant to take you into technical details, but you're in the details. If the period of significance is 1961, there's been ample time to include this building as a contributor all the way along. Just 3 years ago, the city completely updated the preservation plan. It could have been considered a contributor then. If this approach is allowed, it means that there is no such thing as any zoning certainty or clarity as to what contributors and non-contributors are. I, among others, advocated for a comprehensive zoning ordinance when the HPSZ ordinance was amended, just so there would be clarity and certainty. What's happened here is it was a non-contributor. 3 times it could have been considered otherwise. It wasn't reclassified. And only when someone goes to have the rights under the ordinance of a non-contributor remodel, only then is it nominated. This is inviting an ongoing series of undermining the certainty of the ordinance. As for the future, the market is there. It's a tenant. It's not going anywhere. It'll serve the community. But if the market can't remain competitive over time, there will be a disincentive. We urge you to reject the nomination. Thank you.
Susan Levenstein.
Thank you, council members. My father built this market. My family owns this market today. I have always lived in Los Angeles. John Lautner designed the Googie Coffee Shop, which is what some of this meeting is about. My husband and I bought a John Lautner house after we were married. We still live there today. I knew John Lautner. A friend wanted to remodel one of John's houses and asked John for permission. John said, "Houses are for people who live in them." The same is true for this market. This market was designed and built for the people who shop in it. Today, it is still for those people who shop there and the people who work there. The preservationists want to take that from them. The preservationists, most of them, don't shop there. The board member from the Mount Washington Homeowners Group, who spoke here 2 weeks ago, told me he doesn't shop there. He shops at Whole Foods. If the preservationists have their way, the current market operator will leave just the way Albertsons left when the preservationists stopped them twice before. And the market will sit empty and abandoned, and the shoppers will have to travel far away, and the jobs will leave, and the preservationists will have preserved nothing.
Mr. Cedillo.
Yes. Let me restate, as I was saying. I want to thank everybody who participated. The discussion has been very rich, very informing, and I appreciate it. I don't think it's necessary to argue, and there's been a lot of details that are involved here, to argue the details. I mean, I don't want to try to diminish the arguments that have been made with respect to the value or the design or the architectural value. That is really not for me to determine today. What's important for me to determine today is how we go forward. And I have to take note the fact that we have given notice to the developer to go forward, that there have been 3 opportunities to engage with the city to modify and adjust the plans, that we have a record of supermarkets leaving, that this is what people refer to as a food desert, And as the new council member, I am given an opportunity to come in and be unencumbered by the past. But rather than look to the future to see how we can build and revitalize our community. There is dispute over whether or not the 40s was the cutoff or whether or not the 60s were the cutoff. But frankly, the fact of the matter remains is that the developer was told to go forward and then told to go forward a series of times. And we cannot deny that. You're a land use attorney. You would probably tell me that once we did that, that we were now obligated and had some liability or responsibility to fulfill these commitments that we had made. There is a real concern in the city about how people can do business. And really, this really raises a question about when is a deal a deal? When does the city enter into an agreement with a developer who wants to create goods and services, quality food for a community that consumes it? When is a deal when we say we're going to work with them to enhance that product? And it just appears that there's just too many areas of dispute here through this process, too many details to argue over, but there are some overwhelming facts that are very important, and those are that we made a commitment, that we acknowledged that this project was not going to be deterred or impacted by legitimate preservation concerns, that once we did that, that we needed then to have something compelling to change that, something overriding, a mistake, fraud, intervening act of God. None of those things occurred. And so I have to look to the entire community. I have to represent the entire community and look at what their needs are, both architectural, but also real needs as they relate to economic development, as they relate to providing quality food, as they relate to providing a quality environment that looks to the future. And so I would ask you to join me in denying the recommendation of the staff and allowing this project to go forward.
Okay, so a motion has been made to deny the correct language is
that the property not be included in the list of monuments based on the...
Okay, so you didn't... Mr. CLA, can you help me with the correct language that...
Sure. So, Councilman, you are denying the recommendation of the Cultural Heritage Commission. My only question to the city attorney is if you need additional findings.
We could submit those to the clerk.
Okay.
Okay, those will be submitted to the clerk. So with that, a motion has been made. Is there any objection to that motion?
Yeah.
Seeing none, so ordered.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are we okay there?
So I've been informed that the matter's in council tomorrow, just to let Councilman Cedillo know that the findings will be needed for tomorrow's meeting, Councilman.
Yes, sir. So
okay. Question I have is procedurally, we could have those findings in council tomorrow?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we don't need them here today.
Good. We're good. I'll give them
Okay,
to the clerk.
okay. Okay, so ordered.
The next item would be...
Next item?
Public comment, Councilman.
We have one public comment card. Phyllis Doherty. Phyllis Doherty. There you are.
Make my way around. Thank you. And by Phyllis Doherty with the Animal Issues Movement. It seems strange that I'm here today, but what I'm going to speak to you about, it will affect land use, and we are recommending that the issue be brought to you. So that's why I wanted to come in ahead of time. I'm a writer for Opposing Views. We have a very, very large audience, so I've gotten feedback that is going to be supported also by the people that were involved in the injunction against the city. The Bureau of Land Management has just issued a mitigated negative declaration that it is all right to have feral cats fed on the borders of any private property in the city in unlimited numbers. The feeders who are unsworn, they are not licensed, permitted, nor identified, will be able to set up feeding at the edge of anyone's yard, anyone's business, and feed whatever number of cats they wish there. This is going to have a devastating effect on all property, and for those that are in a coyote area, it will really be a problem. Is there only 1 minute on public comment?
Yes, if you could keep
Okay,
going.
I'll go very quickly. The
Yeah.
bottom line on this, the problem is, and for low-income members, I live in Echo Park and Highland Park. So I live where there are problems with animals, and I see it every day. The bottom line of this is that these large organizations that paid for this declaration want the city's money. They can do this freely with all the donated money they want, and there's no interference. They want this designated by the city so that they can get a hold of the millions of dollars that you put in and donors put into the pet sterilization fund for low-income families to have their pets done. That should not be diverted to feral cats. So I will bring you more information, but I wanted you to understand that part.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. So with that, there's no further business in this committee. Meeting adjourned with no objection. Thank you. Thanks, man.